I am Randy, and I'm a professor of sociology. Uh, I'm going to be quickly explaining what are roles and statuses when it comes to sociology. I would like to start us off by asking what determines a person's status in society? Now, when you think about it, a person's status is usually we think of like money or perhaps fame or power. And we got to think, why do we give that person that status? I mean, is it deserving? Is it worthy? Or do we just kind of follow what everyone else is doing? And then I want you to think about how do these social roles that I'm going to be talking about affect the way we interact with one another? All right, let me go ahead and move on to the next slide. One of the things that I would like you to really get is that reality is shaped by the way the people are perceiving it. So if I go to the middle of, I don't know, the jungle somewhere, and I am wearing a certain style of clothing or shoe or have my hair in a certain way, I'm probably going to stand out. I'm not going to fit in. And that might give me, depending on if they view my attire uh, in a positive light or not, I might have a lower social status within that little culture or an elevated one, just depending. I mean, if I show up in like golden armor, they're probably going to look at me and be like, damn. All right. But I mean, that's just one of those things, right? So the point here is that we create this, right? This is artificial. It's not made by some almighty book that's floating around out there that everyone, when they're born, is read to day and night. These things evolve over time. Now, things like the way a person behaves, this can fall into dating, finding a partner, marriage. Ultimately, where does all this come from? As we know, it's not the book. We can come up with our own within our own families, but how does that translate out to the society as a whole? I mean, are we all coming together somewhere and agreeing, yes, this is what we need to teach our kids. This is the way it should be. Well, let's think about that. If you are homeless, you might have a certain idea on the way things should be running. And that might be completely different than somebody who is sitting on the wealthy side of society, and they might have a completely different view of the way things should be running and who should be giving the direction to lawmakers and so on. Now, if we think of some of the things that have been listed as good or bad, well, public intoxication. Depending on where you're at, that could be maybe not necessarily a bad thing, maybe not a good thing, it's just kind of neutral. You know, you go to a party, someone getting drunk and walking around the outside of the house or wherever probably is not going to get looked down upon as badly as if it's a dad stumbling into his kid's little league game drunk and throwing up. So these are examples of way that we can define behavior in our society. Other ones that I listed here, spanking and how that has evolved over time. Slavery, as we all know that in the past, slavery was thought of and treated differently than it is today. However, I would like to add in there that slavery today is kind of still around, just it's more hidden in sweatshops and the sex trade and things like that. But it still is a thriving market, unfortunately. Same-sex marriage just 10 years ago was outlawed, essentially. However, change has happened more recently, and even tattoos over time have once that were once thought of as maybe undesirable and only something one would get if they were deviant, but now is kind of almost almost like a normal thing. When I grew up, tattoos were still kind of that, oh, you're a rebel, you know. But now, if you get a tattoo, you're almost just like fitting in. It has nothing that really stands out as being kind of unique. Well, I don't want to say that, but you get my thinking. All right. Now I'm going to be just kind of asking you some questions. So in your head, just think, when you look at this person in this picture, which one of these, A, B, C, or D, comes into your mind first? Which sticks out the most? That he's a man, perhaps an executive or some type of professional, that he's wealthy. I mean, wealthy enough to be able to afford suits and computer and have a, business desk in some form, or that maybe he's in shape, able to work out, eat healthy. All right. With that in mind, let me go on to the next one. I have a few of these and I'll explain. What about this individual? The first thought that comes in your mind, is it that he's homeless or disabled, or that he's Asian or a man? The very first thing that pops in your head. This person, is it that he's pastor or a man, that he's black or a gentleman? And these individuals are, first thing pops in your head, is it the fact that they're twins or that they're men, maybe part of a counterculture? Is it that they're white? This individual, man, white, gentleman, part of a counterculture. Now, at this guy, depending on your perception of reality, right? Your own background, you might see this as, oh, this is, it's a wealthy guy. Maybe if you grew up and this person was your dad and he always drug you to the gym, maybe your first thought is, oh yeah, he's looking kind of fit. Just depending. And this one, depending on where you're in your own mind and your own experiences, what comes to your mind first? Is it the fact that he is a man, or perhaps that he looks like he's homeless, or that he's disabled? Or is it race? Is it because he's Asian? What falls into place more for you? And with this one, what we're trying to get at is, are you drawn more consistently to race being an identifying factor that is above all the others? I mean, obviously this person is, all these different things, or potentially all these different things, but do you see one rising above the others if you were to describe them to your friends, or someone was describing them to you? Same thing here. I really, when I'm teaching this in class, I really push and try to see if students really identify the race on, depending on my student population too. Do they really go after race with this, or and change it up over here, or vice versa? Is there one race that they tend to notice more than any other races? They get a dominant factor in. And then this last one I put up here, just kind of like a little bit of humor. This is, I believe it's Jeffrey Dahmer, the guy who would, and I think this is him in court, when he would, I think he killed and ate people. So which one stuck out to you first? I mean, if you didn't know him, you might say, yeah, well, he's a white guy, or white. And I put counterculture. I didn't want to clue you in to who he was without you having a chance to do this. His view of what he should do in society was obviously not the norm and ran counter to what we would all like to have happen to any of us. So I just wanted you to think of that, because status is, once again, defined as a person's position in society. And this is not necessarily what you want to be. Yeah, I want to be a billionaire. Yeah, I want to be very fit and healthy and just flashy cars left and right. But does society really see me that way? Does society think that I am rich? Probably not. Well, I mean, I got a decent house. I got an old car. I got some electronics and stuff. I mean, I've been better off, but when I look at the globe as a whole, if I take somebody in, I don't know, a third world country or a developing nation and take them and compare myself to them, I'm very wealthy in comparison. But in terms of my local society, I'm not. So when we look at these things, it's really from the vantage point of the observer and the groups that they're in. Now, when you look at ex-President Obama, one of the things that people typically thought of was that he was black. But in truth be told, he is half and half, white and black. Yet no one really identified him as white. But he still could be. People still could identify him as half white and half black, but that's one of those things that stuck out. You know, others might look at him and think, you know, they don't like him because of his political affiliation, that it's not in line with their thinking. And so that becomes a dominating factor in people's minds. Kind of like if you're trying to hire somebody for a job that involves moving heavy packages and somebody comes in a wheelchair, that might prejudice you against selecting them for the role because you have your own beliefs. When in fact, this person could have just been in a wheelchair for a simple accident that will heal up very soon. But before you have a chance to even talk to them, you might have dismissed them within your own mind. Let's keep going. Now, Ellen here, you know, for a long time she was on TV and was in the closet hiding the fact that she was lesbian. And when it came out, that's the thing that most media tended to focus on, at least in the beginning, because she was one of the early people to identify themselves publicly. Now, the problem with that is she's a comedian. And prior to that, you could say she's a comedian and that is her status. That's who she is. But in reality, you know, as soon as people found out this other thing, their initial impression changed of who and what they are. And this individual, if you don't know who this person is, just from looking at the photo, you can see some complicated math in the background. This is actually, if you're really just not aware, this person is very famous in terms of the calculations that are on the back behind him. That is Stephen Hawking, very intelligent scientist that was also disabled early in his life, and despite being disabled, was able to push through it and become something quite great, quite magnificent. Now think about yourself. What are some of the statuses that you could identify with? And just start writing them down. Like, just come up with 10 if you can. I'll give you an example for myself. Teacher, professor, dad, son, stepdad, husband. I could go further and say gentleman, funny, handsome, beard aficionado. Not really, but you get my point, right? So you can come up with as many of these as you want. I could say, you could do a hobby. Like, I'm a gamer. I love games. I could say something about, dogs and going on trips, and I'm a traveler. I'm an idea man. All right. So once you come up with your own, I want you to just kind of think for a second and go back and start labeling these. There's basically two that I want you to think about. It's the achieved and the ascribed status. Ascribed basically means there's nothing that you can do to have changed that. Your height, not a lot. I mean, unless you get yourself into a really bad accident, not a lot you can do to change your height. You're born and your genetics kind of guide you in a certain way. Your eye color, without color contacts. Let's see, your intelligence. And there's even debate on that too. Your race, your physical prowess, and your innate abilities. Those are things you're born with. They're ascribed to you. You could even argue that if you're born into a wealthy family, or a family in poverty, or middle class, or anywhere in between, that's an ascribed status. You didn't create that. That was given to you upon birth, right? Of course, if we all could pick, I doubt we would all select, hey, I want the hardest life I possibly can. I think we'd all probably try to choose the parents, if we had the choice, that would give us a very good shot at life. Now, the achieve status is basically, for the most part, everything else. Like, you graduated from high school, you graduate from college, you're a football player, you play the piano. For me, it was, I'm a professor, I am a dad. I mean, I did cause that to happen, and so on. Now, of all of those, there's usually going to be one status that we call the master status. It is the one that is above all the others. So when most people look at you, they're going to see this one first, or at least recognize it first. And that will be your dominant status. So it will determine, to a large part, how people are going to interact with you. And if they have in their own mind, maybe they've had some sort of traumatic experience with someone that has that same status, they might react in a very negative way. I'm going to give a really ludicrous, a crazy idea here. If you're growing up and everyone who wears a brown shirt always punched you in the arm. Every time you saw someone in a brown shirt, they ran over to you to punch you in the arm, even if they're across the street. So now you're traumatized for life. Every time you see a brown shirt, you're freaking out because you think they're going to punch you. But it's okay. You moved. You're in a new part of the world where brown shirts don't try to attack you. However, you have that PTSD, that post-traumatic stress, and it is giving you a flinch. It's giving you some apprehension every time you see brown shirt. And that's kind of the idea here, is that when we see someone, like let's say someone who is disabled, certain mechanisms within our own mind that will try to prejudge. I mean, it boils down to our brain is basically lazy, and it doesn't have time to evaluate every single situation it comes into. So it is going to try to pull from background knowledge, and it's going to try to say, which one is this person who's walking up to me on the sidewalk, and then we're about to pass each other? Where do they fit on my little circle of threats? If the threat or if the status is of something that either they have a lot of respect for or just the opposite, that can drive their behavior to discriminate or, give respect. So most of the time in the United States, it does circle around race. That tends to usually be a master status. And with that, they might treat you differently. They might treat you, unfortunately, in a negative way. I mean, that's the history of it. So taking a look here, this is just an example of some different statuses. This kind of goes along with mine. Age is a factor. I didn't mention my age, but it's we could just say I am aged well and like a fine wine or a ribeye steak. I don't know. I'm just daughter. Son, if you have any siblings, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably trying to learn something. And a student comes with its own set of responsibilities. Anyways, and so on. We have a whole slew of different things that you can fit into. Now, each of these statuses will have its own expectations around it. So a role is like you're in a play, right? And if you're the lead role, or maybe you're, a background character, whatever the case is, a role is something, is an individual in this play who is expected to behave a certain way because that is their role. Now, with each of these statuses that we listed earlier, each one has different expectations, right? Now, if I say I'm a husband, okay, you can probably envision within your mind what that entails, right? Because you have an idea of what, either through social media, viewing from your own perspective throughout life, you have an idea of the responsibilities of being a husband and maybe the pressures that go on with it, maybe the Valentine's Day issues. Issues. It shouldn't be an issue, but let's just whatever. Valentine's Day, and and then being a dad too. So all of these things have all these different expectations, right? Are you a grandson or a granddaughter? What are you expected to do? Are you expected to call grandma once a week, once a month, once every 2 months? Never? What is the expectation on you for that role? So these are things that can actually be quite detailed. I mean, if I say, I'm 25, I just look old. I'm really 25. And I tell somebody that there's a certain level of maturity that they're going to expect, or lack of maturity. Let's say all 25-year-olds are awesome because I'm awesome. But it's going to be completely different than, let's say, for a 50-year-old. 50-year-old, you kind of expect them to have their life somewhat together, mostly together. Who knows, really? But someone at 25, their life, we see that as, you got your life ahead of you. You could do anything you want. And expectations change. Now, when you get these roles that you have to play, you can end up with something that's called role conflict. And that's just where these two roles will fight for your time, fight for your responsibility, or fight for your sanity. I put here parent and employee because being a parent, it sometimes is hard trying to work, especially from home, trying to work from home and to be a parent at the same time to kids that are, not very able to take care of themselves. So you get what's called a role conflict. You're trying to be a good parent, you're trying to be a good employee, but they don't always play nice together. Another good example is your boss tells you that something came up and you're going to have to work late tonight, like really late. But tonight is your daughter's performance. She's in the play. She's the lead. This is the last chance you're going to be able to see her. Who gets your time? Do you go to the play and, tell your boss that you just can't? Or do you stay at work because you're afraid of getting fired and you let your daughter down because she wants you to be there? That's hard. That's a hard decision. Personally, I would choose family, but that's just me. Everyone's a little different. Now we got role strain. The difference here is that this is one role. And basically it's stressful because there's a whole lot of expectations and responsibilities within this one role. Like I said earlier, the role of being, let's say a man. The role of being a man kind of just comes naturally, right? There's not a whole lot of expectations other than if you're like out in the dating scene, maybe. But having the role of being a parent to 3 kids that are young, I don't have 3 kids that are young, but if I did, that is a lot of work. Feeding, changing diapers, making sure they're not grabbing the scissors and running around, making sure they're not getting the permanent marker and writing all over the furniture. Making sure that there we go. Making sure that they're getting to bed on time, they're taking their naps, they're getting fed nutritious food, they're not sneaking cookies. If they want to have a play date, you do a play date. Oh, grandma wants to come over and say hi. Oh, now you got to do that too. That's fine, but it is a full-time job, all in one role. You basically got years of responsibilities planned out for you. Many choices a day that go into that. Whereas another role, like being a guy, not a lot of heavy duty life or death, responsibility that necessarily goes with that. I mean, you could say, well, I'm going to protect this person because I'm a guy and I'm going to protect people. Well, okay, great. But that doesn't fit with the guy role. That doesn't fit with being a man. You could say, well, I'm a man. I'm going to join the police or the military. Okay, but that's different. That's a different role. Now that's a police officer. That's a separate role. Man is one thing. Police officer or military officer or anything like that is different. So man is not as wide and not as perhaps important as we like to think sometimes. But anyways, whatever. I'm not trying to start anything. All right, let's see. Make this bigger. Now, if we had time, if this was in class, I would have you kind of go through your list and write down some of the responsibilities that go with each one of those. Like if you're Catholic, okay, what expectation comes from that? What do you have to do? How often do you have to do it? And so on. Are you able to get married outside of your religion, or is that something that's strictly forbidden? And then some role conflicts. If you're a student and an employee somewhere, those two things don't like to play nice together either. If you're a student, employee, and a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, those things don't like to play very well together because they all want your time. All of those things need your time. Now, imagine if you're a single parent, a student, an employee, and you're dating. You got like no time for anything. I mean, you got no time for yourself if you're trying to juggle all that. That's pretty serious stuff. Now, with role exit, this is basically where you are leaving one role. And a very good example of this is retirement, right? So you are an employee, you're a teacher. You've been teaching forever. But now you're retiring. You're going to go get on your pension and you're going to travel the world. You're like, yeah, finally, with arthritis. And you're saying goodbye to your job. You're saying goodbye to everyone you worked with. Now you get to live a painful, because you got arthritis, but relaxing time otherwise. And you get to go see the wonders of the world, hopefully. All right, that's one way. Another way, when you go from being a high school student to being a college student, or maybe you just start working right away. Complete role exit. Going from being single to being in a relationship. You're leaving the role of single and have become this other thing, which has a whole new set of responsibilities. Or vice versa. You break up. That's a role exit. All right. You see how it applies. It can apply to virtually anything. Oh, all right. So we're going to stop there. This is for next time. All right. I hope I was able to help you. I know this went a bit long, but that was what I was trying to do when it comes. That's what I was trying to explain. Well, I don't want to say. Thank you for being with me. I'm going to try to do more of these short form videos. I'm going to try to even cut this one down to make it more digestible. I hope I did. I hope it did you some help. I hope I helped you today. And it's late and I can't talk and I feel like going to sleep. So you have a good day and I'm going to go have a good night. See you later.